Welcome to HR Masters, a podcast where we sit down and talk about key learnings and best practices with the masters of human resources. Find us through Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and other platforms. Now sit back, turn it up, and get ready to get your masters in HR with our host, Jordi Romero.
Welcome to HR Masters. Today we have Anna as guest. Anna is joining us from Stockholm. How are you doing?
I'm great, thank you. How are you?
Very good. Thank you so much for accepting our invitation. Anna has a very impressive profile and experience, not only in HR, but also in strategic management consulting. Why don't you tell us a little bit, where do you come from? How did you end up here?
Exactly. How did I end up here? So I took the broad route when studying at university and studied for a master's in business administration and economics. And I was pretty sure that I wanted to work with marketing and especially brand management. So after university, I started working in marketing and it wasn't as creative as I'd hoped for. I was a bit disappointed and decided that I needed to go back and rethink what I should do. And then I joined a management consulting firm because that's a great way of finding out what to do and you're learning everything. So it's like university but in real life. And I worked there for 7 years in large projects for big international companies, trying different industries and professions and projects. And I learned so much. I really enjoyed it. But I also discovered that the key to success in all projects was really the people. So the strategy could be super clever or not so clever, but it was the people leading who really made the change. And that just made me realizing that I was really interested in this area and I wanted to learn more and work with this. So then I sort of switched and worked more with people strategy projects and also realized that working for huge corporations with pretty slow processes and not always having, employees who loved their work wasn't as empowering and motivating as I, need from my work. So I decided to join a startup instead. Super passionate about tech and found a role in a small startup as a HR business partner. And I remember they told me so how do you know you could do this? You'd never done this before. And I answered, well, you had never done this before either. And you started a company. And they're like, yeah, fair enough. And then it took on. We got good investment. Truecaller was the startup name. And I learned by doing, became the HR director, scaled the company, had so much fun, learned enormous amount. Worked there for 4 years and thought this was great. I wish I could do this again because now I know so much more how to do things. And then Kry or Livy, a digital healthcare provider, got in touch and asked if I wanted to join. They were 30 people. That was 20 months ago. And I felt this is a great chance. I need to do this again. So I joined them as their VP of people operations. And we've been growing really fast, scaling, entering new markets. And it's a new exciting journey that I'm on.
Okay, wow, that's quite an experience. So how many people are you right now at Kry? You started with 20?
Yeah, so now we're 260 non-clinicians, and then we're around 600 clinicians. And we're based in Sweden, Norway, and UK and France. And our vision is to provide excellent healthcare to everyone in Europe.
Okay. So, and these 600 people, why do you separate them from the other 260?
Because it is different, because the clinicians are both, they're working part-time remotely. So they're offering healthcare services through their computer or phone, maybe working from home. They're working for other healthcare providers, physical care as well. Half of them are employed, half of them are consultants. But the 260 people we have, they are the one providing the technology, the product, doing all the commercial, marketing, legal, and they are working more than full time and based in our offices. So it is a bit of different way of how we work together.
Okay, so before we get to the crew and the scale up of this company, like very fast growth in very short period of time. It's very interesting, that from a management consulting point of view, you decided that strategy was maybe not necessarily the number one reason for success, but the people behind it were. What kind of projects were you involved in that had some people strategy
well, it
thing
was
to do?
I worked. Yeah, so it was called Transformational Strategy. It could be how to merge different organizations. It could be the concept of doing lean within the logistics industry, how to create a new product development roadmap. So it could be actually anything, from business cases to trying out new things. But we had a structured approach. And at that time, lean was a new concept, very modern. So it was a lot of lean, whatever it was, and re-engineering processes. It's kind of a lot of that. And also just coming in and seeing, how could you work differently in the organization? How could we have better roles and responsibilities, work with the org development? So really all kinds of projects.
And you mentioned also probably to very large enterprises as customers, right?
Enterprises.
Did you manage to make an impact? Like, did this project see the light?
Well, that's the question. You never knew when you left the building, like, would they just take this PowerPoint presentation and put it in a drawer and never look at it again? That was actually also one of the reasons where I felt, it must be great to work in something where you could actually see the effects. But some, of course, it made an impact, but did I really change the way they worked? I'm not sure.
Okay, well, unfortunately. So switching to a completely different environment, an environment where you probably see the change in a matter of seconds, minutes, or hours, depending on what you do. You've been in 2 startups; they've been growing fast. You mentioned that your passion is scaling organizations. You mentioned the concept of a scale up. What would you consider a scale up?
Yeah, what differs? I think scale up is the version after startup. So first you're a startup, you're for a couple of, you're not so many, you can still share a couple of pizzas using sort of the Amazon way of saying it. But then when you have enough funding and above 100 people and a couple of years old and you're really expanding, I don't think you're a startup phase anymore when you got processes in place and it's more, it's more of a real business. But you're still in hypergrowth phase, then I think it's more of a scale up. But it's a really good question. And I know a lot of huge companies who still call themselves startups, or I know some. They've been alive for 15 years, but they want to have the startup culture. So maybe it's also a bit, what you aspiration as well as how do you identify yourself?
Okay, so let's focus on these scale-ups now. What do you think are the challenges for a scale-up? What's the key to a successful HR at a company such as Cree right now?
It's the people, definitely. It's attracting the right people and then making sure that you retain them by growing them, and at the same way making sure not working with people who don't share the same values and behaviors. So with people and culture fit, there's not like one personality type, but you definitely need to share the values. So it all starts with setting the values. What kind of behaviors are we after? What kind of competences do we need? Finding these super brilliant people and empowering them so that can go about and do a good job. What you should not do is focusing on controlling policies, routines. That's not focus.
So how do you you said that fit in the values from the company and new candidate or potential new employee? How do you measure this fit? Do you actually run a test? Do you have some exercises?
Yeah, we look at all the interviews we do are they're based on behavioral questions, assessments. So we're asking them questions around behaviors. We also do case studies, or they come and meet the team and we can continue doing case discussions, testing the behaviors and the values again. For leaders, we do a third assessment, looking at preferred work behaviors. So not saying if you're red or green or yellow, but more like these are your preferred behaviors, and then we can see if it matches the values and behaviors we believe in. So I think you can test that in many ways just by interviewing. and see how.
Would you say those are like standard interviews and techniques, or is just like all a conversation, and then from this conversation you try to extract this?
No, it's pretty, I think we have identified questions that we think are super important, and, we're looking for, these are warning signs, and these are really interesting signs. For our company, we need people, I think people who want stability and can't really deal with ambiguity and uncertainty or changing conditions, they will probably not be very happy working with us. So we need to have people who are totally fine with that, who can, run with something even if they don't have all the information, who can take decisions. It could be a wrong decision, but they're okay with taking a decision. And people who are, have the grit, who see failures as learnings. And then you can ask a lot of questions about that, about the risks they've taken, about their learnings, how do they view their failures. So I think we've sort of identified these are the things to look out for in people. And of course, we're getting more and more data as we grow. So now we really see what kind of people, really prosper and grow and are amazing, and, what kind of people struggle a bit more, and we learn from that.
Okay, so that's sounds like a very methodological approach to finding the value fit. It's interesting, probably related to your consulting theme. So how do you empower or nurture or foster these values over time, or these people in general in the company?
I think that this is so important. And just going back to why I think it's so important, I think that there are three things that really matters for people. It's all based on the Dan Pink research, but like autonomy, mastery, purpose. So autonomy, they feel that, they've got freedom. No one is micromanaging them. They can decide what to do. They're smart people. Mastery, constantly learn. And purpose, that there's a higher purpose with what they do. And as we provide healthcare services, that's forgiven. So really working them with autonomy, which is trickier as you grow as a company, because it's sort of, you want to add more control, you should add more context. So it's all about giving a lot of context. We have Slack where we share all the information. So we don't send emails. So no one is sitting with lots of hidden information in their inbox. Slack is available. You can add different, you can join channels. You can see what's going on. So, constantly giving information, having the all hands on the Mondays, having the demos and the retros and the Fridays. It's a lot about constantly giving information. Having, we're putting together, we used to work with bets, company bets were like cross-functional initiatives. But I think we're trying to empower people to, take something, be accountable for it, and then, go ahead and execute on it. So we're giving people lots of responsibility very early on. That's one way of empowering them.
In all of these things that you're mentioning, are you saying that those are responsibilities for HR, or the kind of like for the business in general?
I think it's for the business in general. But I think HR has a very important role in this. How do we view people? How do we communicate with people? How can we encourage and empower people and enable them to do a good job? That's what, we should be the enablers and not the stoppers. So not the ones saying you can't do that. Instead, we should be like, how can we support you? You want to do this, you're responsible for your development, you're driving it, but I'd love to support you. Let me know how I can support you. So that approach.
Okay. I love this concept of giving more context. I actually think that's one of the most important parts of a CEO's job, is to just give context. Probably not the enabler. Maybe that's more HR, who supports that communications channels are there and so on. But it's setting the vision, repeating it, reinforcing the values, making sure there is no blocking between, different units in a company that should be collaborating with each other, and they're not because they don't know that they should be collaborating with each other. I think, I see that as a big part of my job, for instance, as CEO of Factorial. But interesting that you see HR, supporting there. So, How interesting question. You mentioned also this, having some goals and some transparency in what people need to accomplish. What do you think is the goal of HR, or how do you measure success of HR in a company like yours right now?
I think we measure by, what the HR mission is find the best people and then make sure that we grow them and retain them. And that can be measured in so many ways. I mean, we could measure it as we're finding really great people and we're scaling at the pace we want to. We can look at engagement. So we got a tool integrated with Slack where we measure engagement and 10 different metrics every week. So we could see the trends, how teams are doing. I think that's one way of looking, from recognition, feedback, satisfaction, ambassadorship.
So all of this is happening in Slack?
Yeah, we use an Office Vibe, a tool,
okay.
And we're integrating with Slack. So we're actually constantly checking how are the teams doing. That's one way of measuring it. We could measure it looking at retention numbers, although I don't think it's as easy as saying, it should be as low as possible. It's not that simple. Then, you're looking at everything from diversity to, and diversity not only in recruiting, but how's the diversity in management, in leader positions, when you look at promotions, etc. And the onboarding, we do a lot of evaluations. And for example, our onboarding process is great. People love our onboarding. And when they tell me like, this is the best onboarding I've ever had, that's a great reward that the team is doing an amazing job. Also, when people are leaving, we're leaving as good friends, and we're having a good structured offboarding process with the mutual respect. That feels like a success as well. When you have also look at how many internal, how many people are actually changing careers, maybe being promoted or just joining another team. I think that's a huge sign of success. So actually we're taking care of the people and we're, developing. So there's so many different aspects of what HR could do.
Okay, well, that was a lot. You definitely have some clear goals for your HR department. So I'm very curious about your onboarding process. I mean, tell us a little bit more. If I was to join tomorrow, what would I find?
Yeah, so first from you sign, and then you will get a little package delivered home to your to your home with a bit of surprise gifts. That's nothing special. But then we have this HR system where you get like electronic onboarding. So you would get tasks and information on a regular basis, and you would fill out some facts about yourself that would be sent out to everyone. And you will get all the, the pre-information and what work equipments you want, etc. So when you come the first day, everyone in the company know who you are because they read, the message about you in Slack, and know some fun facts about you. People would be welcoming. The team will onboard you. We'll have a team onboarding. Then we'll have a company onboarding. You will be presented in all hands, and you will also be welcome to the intro days, which is every month when all new joiners fly into Stockholm, and we have sessions with the CEO and founders and all the different positions, and they're doing some workshops together and going for dinner. So it's not, it's still budget, but it's just very, very much making the new person feeling super welcome. And getting to know the company really fast so they can start working.
And when does the onboarding finish? Is it the day of joining the company, the week after? How do you define the end of an onboarding?
We also have in the system that the manager should have a clear 3-month follow-up and also a 1-month follow-up, and making sure that the expectations are right, because we don't always have role descriptions. We have expectations from the employee, expectations for the manager. And when we know that that's clear, if they sort of pass the 3-month expectation talk, I think sort of the onboarding is over. And especially for us with so many new employees, if you worked for a couple of months, you're one of the oldest employees in the company.
That's It's a crazy fact about fast-growing companies. I remember a friend of mine who used to work at Facebook and said, like, it's crazy that 50% of the team has been here for less than a year, and 50% of the team is thousands and thousands of people. So it's ridiculous when you are in a scale up.
And I should also say that working in a startup or scale up is like dog years. So if you work 1 year, it's like 7 years in ordinary company. So when you work 3 years, you actually work 21 years. It's really
feels that way.
It goes fast.
Okay.
You learn.
So you mentioned a lot of things that you see them from an HR perspective, but I think they're core to the business, and the mission, vision, values, the strategy of the business, the people strategy of the company. You have to work very close with the founders, and you mentioned before that you have a special relationship with the founders. How would you define this relationship? What's your role next to the founders?
Yeah,
how do you collaborate with each other?
I work super close with the founders because they started this company with a vision, and that is that's why we joined them. So we're all united in driving the vision. But usually founders have strong characteristics. They don't always listen to people, they go their own way. And that's why they're so successful, because if you listen too much to all the naysayers, you wouldn't do anything. So that's an amazing characteristic. And you have this energy and passion. But I think sometimes founders need to be surrounded with someone, adding a bit more of, not too much structure, but, setting the context, looking from the people perspective, looking at the communication part. And I think that's where I'm sort of adding to the founders. So they have a clear vision on how to do it. And then I'm like, okay, so you have the why, and then this is the how to do it. And this is how we can communicate the why and translate it so that everyone understands it.
And did you find in some occasions, some topics where you could not agree with the founders for any reason? You really said, like, we need to do this thing, or the other way around?
Yes, absolutely. Sometimes we disagree, and then we have a conversation about it. And if I'm like, when I have a really strong opinion, I try to, back it up with data, and we'll see how that goes. And then I'm pretty, I won't give up. So maybe, we'll be like, okay, let's not discuss this for now. And then I'll take it up again. But of course, I also listen a lot to them because it's their business. They're super smart, and they're ahead in their thoughts. So I also need to learn and listen into them. But absolutely, sometimes we disagree, but we solve it.
Do you dare giving us an example where HR and founders would disagree, for example? Something that's solved already, something that's maybe not recent.
I think for a lot of founders, like the whole working hard, working together, sitting as a team, crunching, that's like, whoa, this is their baby. And sometimes maybe it's hard to understand that for not for all employees, this is the baby that, they've got other personal hobbies or families. And so they could leave earlier, and that's fine. And I think then when you've been there from the beginning, you're like, why are not everyone sitting here in every evening, and we're just working hard like we used to do when we were 20 people. But that's part of scaling the business. And I think that's where you could, we could have discussions around that. And I've seen this in more, I think this is the classical sign.
So I'll put you against the ropes now, because this happened to all of us. I mean, my previous company, when we started, we were all like 23, 24, like mostly single, free riders and no responsibilities, and eventually people, got older. They had significant others, some had babies, they had families, they had mortgages, like suddenly a lot of more responsibilities. Money mattered a lot more when you're like 30-something than when you're 20-something, and the working hours became a thing, like some people needed to leave to go take care of their family. And we didn't know how to handle it. Like, what's your recommendation for a situation like this? How do you, tackle a situation so tricky as this?
I think we should not focus on the actual, work hours. We should focus on how much do you get done when you work. And I mean, in the ideal world, you would work as little as possible and get as much output as possible. That to me is like, that's what we should be striving for. So we could have people without families sitting all night in the office, but they could be playing games or whatever. what do we know? And we have parents with young children, and they're super efficient. You know, they hardly take lunch. They're like never do anything else than work because they want to leave early and go home to the babies. That's fine. You know, we need to cater for all kinds of aspects of life and not focus on the actual work hours. Or I think it's much more about like, you know, this is what you expected to do, and how, you know, how do you deliver this, and is that good enough, and not for how long time did it take for you to deliver this. So focus on that aspect.
On delivery. And then, you know, it comes challenging, for instance, when you mix different profiles, right? So a salesperson, a customer service person, and a product designer, they're totally different, like, working schedules. One maybe needs 2 good hours of creativity to do a week's worth of work, and the other one needs to be there like from 8 a.m. until whatever hour they're working, office hours, you know, open and taking the phone. And, you know, this can sometimes create comparatives and say, this guy's just, you know, playing ping pong all afternoon and I have to be sitting by my desk. So
exactly. And I think it's all about, instead of going around assuming like, why is she not working as much and why is he doing that? Just assuming good intent, like trusting people to do their job. I think everyone, with a few exceptions, most people want to do a really good job. You know, that's what we do. Sometimes we don't have the right context or the right tools to be able to do it, but people want to do a good job. So if we assume that people want to do a good job and not, you know, trying to find out who's working less and focus on your own stuff, I think that's much better. And if you have a problem with someone, talk to them and learn, like, how are they working, instead of creating rumors.
Especially if you did a good job at, you know, finding a good fit with values, and you know, the selection process was good. So before we have to finish, one question I'd ask you: imagine if you went back in time, you know, and you were again early in your career and you knew you wanted to get into HR. What did you wish you knew back then?
If I'd gone back early in my career, I think I would have. I think that I would believe more in myself and my skills. So not actually, you know, taking more space and making myself heard. I've also learned that I don't need to spend as much time doing fancy PowerPoints. So it's much better to actually, because when you're done with the whole presentation, it's out of date because something's happened. So instead, focusing on talking to people, making sure that we have a good communication that way, and working with the people relationships much more. That's something I wish I'd learned. I think I'd learned earlier on how to be more assertive as well. Because sometimes I think people believing that an HR person must always be this happy, warm person, it's very soft, and, you know, that's not good for anyone. To be assertive, like setting the clear expectations and being clear and honest, and a bit more using the radical candor feedback instead of trying to be liked.
Okay, interesting. Radical candor is also an interesting read for people who don't know it.
Yeah, I think it's a really good read for most leaders, actually.
It helped me a lot, actually, early in my career when I had to face some, you know, like separation conversations, people who didn't work out. And, you know, first you just try to, you know, point out what didn't work, then that's a disaster, then you hide it, then people don't understand, get very frustrated. So I think that's a very interesting tool for anybody who's like a manager, leader, or, you know, especially if you're in HR.
I totally agree with you. I think it's a must-read book. It's great.
So we'll finish with this recommendation. I hope everybody had a, you know, very interesting time hearing your story and your learnings. Thank you so much for joining us, Anna. We're very happy to have you here in HR Masters. And to everybody else, thanks for listening, and see you next week at HR Masters.
If you like this, subscribe to our channel and don't forget to tune in next week to HR Masters.